Leaders of the BRICS group of leading emerging economies, nations touched down in Brazil ahead of their summit with expansion of its development bank reportedly on the cards of the talks. China's President Xi Jinping and South Africa's Ramaphosa flew into the capital. The presidents of the group of major emerging economies, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, will meet in Brazil's capital today and tomorrow for what are widely expected to be low-key technical discussions. Recep Tayyip Erdogan has arrived in Washington a day before his meeting with US President Donald Trump, who has openly complimented the Turkish leader and his combative ruling style, calling him a friend and a hell of a leader. Such fondness from Trump from Erdogan is seen by many as the only reason why relations between Turkey and the US have not completely collapsed, having soured severely over their disagreements on a host of other issues. Bolivian Senator Jeanine Áñez was sworn in as interim president as the country scrambles to restore order after weeks of protests that finally brought down Evo Morales. Morales was the last of wave of Latin American leftist leaders who dominated the region's politics at the start of the century. Áñez has told media her role as president is only transition and until transparent elections are held. Morales' resignation came after the Organization of American States declared there were serious irregularities during the October 20th vote. Australia's High Court agreed to hear former Vatican Treasurer George Pell's final appeal to overturn his conviction for sexually assaulting two teenage choir boys. Pell, who is in jail serving a 6-year sentence handed down by lower court in March, turned to the High Court after a first appeal upheld his conviction. The appeal has been referred to a full bench of 5 of 7 judges, with the hearing on the appeal expected in March 2020 at the earliest. A protester used a bow and arrow in Hong Kong to fight back against increasing police brutality. Anti-government protesters, including a number of students, threw petrol bombs and lit fires in a standoff against police outside the city's Chinese university. Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam said protesters were being selfish and she hoped that universities and schools would urge students not to take part in the demonstrations. The clashes took place a day after police shot a protester at close range. As Lebanon protests continue in unprecedented scenes, thousands of peaceful protesters from different religious and class sectors of society assembled in cities across the country, accusing the political leadership of corruption and calling for social and economic reforms. The right to citizenship is one of the many long-standing demands to have found new life in the mass protest sweeping Lebanon since October 17th. Dozens of Catalan pro-democracy independence supporters gathered in front of French consulate in central Barcelona to protest against the police actions on Spanish-French border. French riot police dispersed and sprayed gas at hundreds of protesters who had been blocking a major road linked between Spain and France for nearly 24 hours. 19 people have been arrested so far for participating in the roadblock. Catalonia has been rocked by mass protests since long prison sentences were handed down in mid-October to 9 separatist leaders who spearheaded a failed independence bid in 2017. State workers in Chile have promised to launch a massive nationwide walk-off, a sign that protesters are not yet satisfied following the government's decision to rewrite the country's heavily critiqued dictatorship-era constitution. New round of rallies and strikes over inequality and social injustices follow almost a month of unrest in Chile. Demonstrations have sometimes devolved into arson, riots and looting, leaving at least 20 dead and wreaking havoc and also damaging the economy and causing damage to the public infrastructure and private businesses as well. Santiago's public transport system has been hobbled. Michael Bloomberg has filed paperwork to appear on the ballot in Arkansas for the March 3rd presidential primary. Billionaire and former New York mayor has not formally announced a bid for the Democratic presidential nomination, but his trip to Arkansas is the latest indication that he is leaning toward a run. Bloomberg sent staffers to Alabama last week to file for the primary there. He is moving toward a presidential bid as he warns that the current field of Democratic presidential candidates is not equipped to defeat President Donald Trump next year. Doctors at Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit said that they had performed what they believe was the first ever double lung transplant in the U.S. due to a vaping-related illness. The patient was a 17-year-old male who had been admitted to the hospital with what was first thought to be a case of pneumonia. The teen continued to struggle with breathing and was put on life support. His doctors eventually determined his condition was due to vaping and that the irreparable damage it had caused meant the teen could not survive without a lung transplant. Andrea Bocelli has staunchly defended opera legend Placido Domingo, calling it absurd that opera houses have cancelled the star's performances over sexual harassment allegations before they are fully investigated. 3 U.S. music companies have cancelled Domingo appearances following allegations of sexual harassment made by multiple women earlier this year. Domingo also withdrew from a slate of performances at New York's Metropolitan Opera. However, he was disputed the allegations and called them simply incorrect. Bocelli is the most prominent artist to speak out on behalf of the Spanish opera star, arguing against the call-out culture. Teenage activist Greta Thunberg will be glaring down at people in downtown San Francisco, where an artist has unveiled a giant mural of her on a building, hoping it will act as a reminder for residents of the dangers posed by climate change. 60 feet tall and 30 feet wide mural was created by an Argentine street artist who also painted a now demolished mural of the late actor Robin Williams in San Francisco. The artist signs his art and says that he usually does not address politics, religion or sports in his artwork. An orange haze was seen over Sydney's iconic Bondi Beach at sunset as bushfires raged across the Australian state of New South Wales. Fires burn across a large part of Australia's east coast, destroying more homes and shrouding Sydney in smoke from a blaze. Meanwhile, the authorities fear they will be unable to control the wildfires until next week. 11 emergency warnings in South Wales has been issued as around half of the 70 fires across the state are burning uncontrolled in conditions termed catastrophic. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson chaired a meeting of the government's emergency Cobra committee to discuss responding to flooding in the north of England, an issue that has come to the forefront of British politics. Following the Cobra meeting, Johnson warned this flooding would not be a one-time crisis, but rather something the UK would have to invest in long-term. Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn challenged the sitting government's handling of the floods while campaigning in the coastal town of Blackpool. Northern Italian canal city of Venice is facing its first significant flood of the current rainy season. Citing the latest Italian National Met Service, the city government of Venice has said that the water levels rose from 109 centimeters to 110 centimeters between Sunday and Monday. They expected to further rise to 125 centimeters as factors such as more rainfall combined with overloaded drainage systems generally lead to city flooding. A meteor lit up the sky over St. Louis, Missouri. Hundreds of residents reported seeing a bright flash of light across at least 2 countries. And these counties, in fact, many also reported hearing a loud boom as the meteor streaked across the sky around 9 p.m. local time. The sighting coincides with the height of the northern Taurids meteor shower, which is known for its spectacular fireballs. A rare portrait of Austrian classical composers, Mozart, will be sold by a British auction house on November 27th in Paris at an estimated price of between 800,000 and 1.2 million euros. The artwork, one of the 4 paintings painted during the composer's lifetime and still part of a private collection, was painted in 1770 and attributed to Italian painter. The oil and canvas portrait depicts the 13-year-old Mozart playing at his harp in front of a score and wearing white wig and a red frock coat. Thousands of tourists from across the world flocked to Asia's largest camel fair in India's state of Rajasthan as the grand event came to a close in grand manner. Popular for trade of thousands of animals, mainly camels, every year traders and tourists converge on the sand dunes of Pushkar for the fair. Last day of the Pushkar fair saw participants indulge in a variety of activities, including a tug-of-war competition between foreigners and locals and fire stunts. Folk artists also displayed India's culture with traditional dance performances and music. A bride in Plant City, Florida, asked her bridesmaids to hold puppies instead of flowers at her wedding. Andy Ondina is an animal rescue advocate and wanted to raise awareness about Adopt Don't Shop movement, and she used her big day for this opportunity. All of her bridesmaids carried 5-week-old puppies at the wedding. All the puppies will be up for adoption later this month. The guests also had the opportunity to fill out adoption applications.